The Talking Cheeseheads on CheeseheadTalk.com.
Talking Cheeseheads on CheeseheadTalk.com. Ben Larson on this Friday post-first-round draft coverage, and we're going to be talking to Ben Worgull of the Badger Nation in just a minute here. But I wanted to remind you, of course, we're on Facebook. Check out our Facebook page on Facebook.com/Talking Cheeseheads, and you can see the latest posts. We've got a lot of information up there, good info about the Packers' first-round draft pick and seeing what they're going to do here tonight as well. And, of course, the Badgers, every year we go through their prospects as well and what they see for the NFL draft. And Ben Worgull's been kind enough to join us, as I mentioned. And Ben, it's a good thing that Travis Frederick got picked. Cowboys in their spot late in the first round decided to go with the Badgers center. And then they catch some flack for it. And I know you had a chance to talk with Travis. I'm sure he was elated, of course, to be a first-round pick because he wasn't projected that high. And my sense of it is that any NFL team that drafts a Badger offensive lineman has to feel pretty good from the school standpoint of where that lineman's coming from. But there's been some criticism that was a real reach by the Cowboys. What do you think?
Well, I think Dallas looked at the opportunity to really shore up one of their needs, and that was that offensive line, particularly the center position. And, you look at what Dallas had last year. They had 6 different centers throughout a season that was marred with a lot of transition and an 8-8 record. So in order to protect your franchise quarterback, Tony Romo, who they just give a ton of money to, you're going to need to really shore up that area of need and that area of want. And I think, with Dallas, their offensive coordinator and offensive line coach is Bill Callahan, who was a UW assistant for a number of years under Barry Alvarez. And I think that it always kind of comes full circle in that kind of way. And Dallas, knowing that they needed a guy like that, probably knew Travis Frederick was not going to be around when they picked 15th tonight, number 47 overall. And, Jerry Jones met with Travis. Travis went down there to Dallas and got the tour of the facility. I don't know if he worked out or not, but just the interaction between Jones and Frederick, from listening to their conversation that's posted up on the Cowboys website, how Jones was just really impressed with an engineering major who got 2 degrees in 4 years, extremely versatile. He can play center or left guard. I think it's a great pick for Dallas. Obviously every team has a lot of needs, and Dallas just chose to pick the best center in the draft to hopefully shore up that important area need for Romo and the Cowboys.
I feel the urge to make a bunch of jokes about smart football players in Dallas and how that might be a rarity, and that would impress Jerry Jones. But you make your own joke there. The thing that they're getting, the criticism is that he could have slipped down to the second round. Well, perhaps, and maybe you know the story better than I do. If Dallas couldn't find a partner willing to trade and drop down, 10 picks and hope he'd be there. You have to pick the guys you like, right? That's probably kind of the story here. You mentioned a little versatility here, and that he can play center or left guard. And you pick the guy you really want to pick in that situation, even if there is some criticism there.
Yeah, it takes 2 to trade, and Dallas traded down from 18 to 31, and they probably felt that at 31, maybe that Frederick was going to be the best fit there. It's you always take the best player available on your board that kind of maybe fits what your need is. You saw it with the Packers last night when they picked the defensive end out of UCLA, and now with Frederick too. They probably could have drafted down, but then you risk when you do that, you risk your player not being there. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and I think just from their interview process and from the workout process that Dallas just really liked Frederick. And you mentioned too about the Wisconsin offensive line tradition. 15 offensive linemen from Wisconsin have been drafted since 2000. That's far and away more than any other school. You break down even farther, 10 of those picks were in the top 100, which is tied with USC for the most. So a lot of guys have come into the league from Wisconsin at that position and had really, really solid careers. And I think Frederick obviously projects to be one of those guys. It was an offensive lineman draft last night. 9 guys taken in the first round, and it's kind of, maybe it's like keeping up with the Joneses too. You see all these other guys, no pun intended there with Jerry Jones, but you see all these guys picking these big offensive tackles, these offensive guards, and to really kind of solidify their offensive line. And Dallas, without question, that's an area of need for them, and they picked the best offensive lineman on the board with the most versatility, and that's Travis Frederick.
And I got to ask you before we move on to looking at Monte Ball and Ricky Wagner, Mike Taylor, some other prospects that should get drafted here. In regards to meeting with Jerry Jones, that's probably kind of surreal because Jerry Jones is a big freaking deal, right? We see all the time. And you had a chance to talk to Travis. What were his thoughts? Like, not only the elation of being a first-round draft pick, but then also that experience had to be pretty interesting to go down to Big D, because now it's really big time. Everything's really big down there. That's the best way to describe it.
Yeah, I mean, he was shocked like the rest of us. I think I said that already, but he was very surprised that he was picked in the late first round, kind of like what Kevin Zeitler was last year. Zeitler wasn't expected to be a first-round draft pick either, but the Bengals swooped him up, I think, like around 28 or something like that. And, Zeitler had a great rookie season as well, but, Travis was obviously a guy very confident in his abilities. That's why he left Wisconsin after his junior season. He felt he was ready to make that jump, and I think that really got, validated last night with that pick. And, the thing I like about Frederick and talking to him is that he's really excited because he knows he's going into a good situation. He calls Dallas a great fit, thinks he'll be able to start or compete for starting time right away, and kind of thinks that Dallas is just maybe a piece or two away from being a team that could contend, in the playoffs. And we haven't seen that with Dallas the last several years. And maybe now you solidify the offensive line, depending on what the Cowboys do later tonight. Maybe that can help them kind of take that next step forward and being a team that consistently makes the playoffs instead of a team that's consistently kind of in that 8-8, 10-6 range. And Frederick is a guy that isn't going to wow a lot of people. He's not that flashy, sexy pick, but he's certainly a guy that could be Dallas' starting center for the next 10, 11, 12 NFL seasons. Yeah,
that certainly is probably what you get, and which in the end will grade out pretty well, I think, as people look at that throughout history. Well, Monte Ball still on the board, along with the likes of Ricky Wagner, expected to be more of a mid-round pick, and then maybe Mike Taylor later in the draft as well. How do you see it going? I mean, would you expect definitely tonight Monte to have his name called?
Yeah, I think with them doing 2 rounds tonight, and Monte obviously with the season and the career that he's had, I think he'll be a second-round selection, maybe early third, but not much lower than that. And I think there's a lot of teams now that address their first area of need, and now there's teams that are looking at what else can we get to really make this a better football team. And I think Monte, being the second-rated running back in the draft behind Alabama's Eddie Lacy is a guy that, just look at his career here at Wisconsin, what he was able to do from scoring touchdowns to being a team leader to being versatile, to being a good pass catcher. That's 59 career receptions for him. Really shows that he can be a factor in the screen game. We saw him throw the football a little bit too, so he's got that little caveat to his game. And there's a lot of teams out there that have picks in the mid to late second round that could use a running back. St. Louis just lost Steven Jackson. Denver's got Willis McGahee, but he's coming off an MCL injury and he's 31. Green Bay, hasn't had a really sound running back in a number of years. Could that be Monte Ball? I know a lot of fans in the state of Wisconsin would like to see this guy picked by the Packers in the second round. But whatever situation he goes to, certainly he's gonna be in a good fit. The NFL Advisory Board last year said he was going to be a third to a fourth round pick. Now he's between a second and a third. He wanted to come back to improve his draft stock, and he certainly did that. And he certainly had a really impressive senior year despite all the adversity, all the transition that team had to go through in the non-conference season.
And I think, Ricky Wagner is pretty self-explanatory. I mean, another guy who's projected, from what I saw, rounds 4 to 6, who again, probably projects to have a pretty solid pro career just with the pedigree, Wisconsin offensive lineman, that sort of thing. The one I wanted to focus on, though, too, with you, Ben, was Mike Taylor, who probably didn't grade out well with all the tests you do in the shorts, right? The 40, the high jump, the broad jump, all that stuff. But yet we just saw him make plays here at Wisconsin continuously throughout his years here. And that has to mean something, especially, as guys get further in the draft, to take a look at somebody who, might have some upside or just be a good, solid player for you.
Yeah, I think he'll get an opportunity just because of what he was able to do throughout his career. I mean, 378 tackles, 38.5 tackles for loss. A guy that the last 2 years was extremely healthy during the season. Now he's got a very long injury list. I mean, he's had bone spurs removed from his neck. He had a torn ACL. He had sports hernia surgery. He's had so many different things done. Shoulders were operated on, and that's kind of the thing that probably really cost Taylor throughout this process from the end of the Rose Bowl to where we are today, because he had sports hernia surgery after the Rose Bowl. Well, he wasn't able to compete in anything. He couldn't do the NFL Scouting Combine in Indianapolis. He couldn't do his pro day here at Wisconsin. And then he had to cancel his individual workout in late March because his just body wasn't ready yet. And I don't know if he was ever able to reschedule that. So, you know, and like you mentioned with the speed too, I mean, you saw what the wheel route did to Wisconsin this past season. You know, that's obviously fell a lot on Taylor. So, but he's a guy that has made a lot of plays, but you just have to think a guy with his talent level is got to fit somewhere into a roster. Now, can he be a special teams guy? Maybe, but then you bring in that speed part of it. You know, is he ready to be a linebacker in a defense? You know, maybe not. Depends on the scheme and the fit, but. You know, Taylor's one of those interesting guys that I don't think will get drafted, but certainly will have a number of opportunities in the free agent market, and he's certainly going to pick the best option for him and hopefully have a really stellar, you know, career as a free agent, much like, you know, Scott Tolzien and Chris Maragos have had.
Yeah, almost sometimes, a lot of times, you take a look and you ask a player, would you rather be a 7th-round pick or a free agent? And a lot of them will say free agent because that's a team that actually wants to bring you in and take a look at you rather than making a draft pick because they have to. So, you know, either or. I mean, it's probably kind of a horse to piece, but hopefully Mike Taylor gets a good shot to do that. I want to talk to you about the spring game, which was over a week or almost a week ago now at Camp Randall. And, you know, Badger fans, of course, any football fans, going to focus on really the quarterback position, especially when it's up in the air. And you saw, you know, Joel Stave and Kurt Phillips competing. I have to ask you, Ben, is someone who's looking at the Badgers, you know, every time you get a chance to at practice, the last time we all saw Kurt Phillips, he struggled to get the ball above his offensive lineman's shoulder pads and helmets, which is, you know, a little bit frustrating for Badger fans from the standpoint of wanting to see a quarterback come in and make some crisp throws. But I understand that, you know, he's improved. I mean, what do you think in this battle? It appears that he and Stave and then the transfer they're going to bring in are going to be that's going to be the story this fall.
Yeah, I think you look at this spring as a whole, and I think Kurt Phillips really improved from where we saw him in the fall. You know, whether that was just because of the stuff he was able to do in the fall, or do in the spring, excuse me, with really improve his arm strength, improve his, you know, just his overall game, his confidence after having gone through so many starts, remains to be seen. I think at times last fall, you know, he was really handcuffed by Matt Canada and Brett Bielema with the playbook. I mean, we didn't see, you know, Wisconsin really open it up in any game where Kurt Phillips was under center, and I think that maybe was a little bit to the detriment of Wisconsin. Now in the spring, you know, certainly in the practices that were just open to the media, we saw Phillips maybe air it out a little bit more and really kind of show off his arm strength, which is, you know, talking to him is much more improved from where it was last year. Now, you look at the spring game, and Kurt Phillips only went like 18 of 13 for under 100 yards passing, and 31 of those came on one play. So you kind of, you know, you have to wonder, you know, exactly what kind of Kurt Phillips are we going to see. You know, Joel Stave obviously had a great spring game, but you take the spring as a whole, he really wasn't that consistent guy that Wisconsin is really looking for. I mean, some practices he's really good, really on target, and some practices he looks really lost. He looks like a guy that only has played a year or two of college football. So it's one of those things where it's really going to come down to the fall, I think. And, you know, like you mentioned, Tanner McAvoy, the junior college sophomore that's going to be coming in a couple weeks, is going to get an opportunity to win the starting job. You know, Danny O'Brien and Bart Houston, I think, could get themselves in the mix, but they need to have a good summer. They need to have a good start of fall camp because both of those guys did not have a really productive spring. But you're right. It's every year now it seems like quarterback is kind of the number one issue everyone wants to talk about. And Wisconsin got spoiled for a couple years with Tolzien and Russell Wilson. And yeah, I think that, you know, last year with them having 4 quarterbacks and just no consistency, I think the record reflected a team that really struggled to really get that momentum generated on offense. And whoever the guy is this year has got to be a better overall game manager and also a guy that can take some shots down the field to really open up defenses.
Yeah, and I think I think, you know, people are excited to see what Tanner McAvoy brings to the table because it's largely an unknown is from a, you know, just casual fan standpoint. And then you have just, you know, you hear about recruits that come in, and it's been, I don't know, for Wisconsin, you know, when the last time a, you know, somewhat blue chip recruit came in and was able to actually pan out. We got excited about Bud Meyer and even Kurt Phillips, you know, a few years back, and the list goes on. And the latest one's Bart Houston that I want to get excited about. But and it's not that he won't probably, you know, he's a redshirt freshman basically, and he had shoulder surgery last year, so it's not that he won't. But do you see the potential in him by the time he's a junior, senior? We're talking about him and talking about him being able to not only manage a game but be a playmaker for the Badgers.
if he gets his confidence up, I can see it. And like you mentioned, I mean, he did not start throwing the football at Wisconsin until maybe October or November after having shoulder surgery. So that's a long time to be going, without throwing the football. And the other thing too with him, I mean, he won a ton of games at De La Salle High School out in California, but he ran it primarily out of the veer offense. And now he's got to learn a new offense while getting his shoulder ready. Now he's got to learn a new offense at Wisconsin, or a new offensive coordinator. That's a lot to have on your plate. And you're right. I mean, Wisconsin has had a bunch of blue chippers pan out, but they haven't had a bunch of blue chip quarterbacks really pan out. I mean, you could argue, what about Tolzien or Russell Wilson? Well, Russell Wilson doesn't count. That's a special case. And Tolzien was a late signee in his recruiting class. I mean, he only got a scholarship offer, I think, like a couple of weeks before National Sign Day. He was virtually an unknown. So Bart Houston, without question, is the best quarterback Wisconsin's ever landed. But you have to wonder, how is he going to fit into this whole equation? Because he's a redshirt freshman, Stave's a redshirt sophomore, Tanner McElroy is going to be a redshirt sophomore. So there's a lot of young quarterbacks, and I think a lot of people want to see Bart Houston be a multi-year starter for Wisconsin. But what happens if he doesn't get the starting job for a couple of years? How are fans going to react? How is Bart Houston going to react? And so he's got the potential and the makings of it. I think just with everything going on for him this spring, plus him being out of the weather, I think just was a lot for him to really digest. And so I think at this point next year, if Bart's not at a higher level, then the red flag should start to be raised. But I think right now, like you mentioned, he's just still coming into his own. There's still plenty of time for him to make an impact. Yeah, excited to see it if you can, obviously, because you hear about the potential. Last question for you, Ben, just in regards to Gary Anderson, from music at practice to now singing on Wisconsin after football games to the different rules in the spring game to, I guess he's running in the, I've heard he's running in the 5K, the Crazy Legs this weekend in Madison. I mean, this guy is coming in and, he's really embracing the job, for one. I don't sense any Barry Alvarez shadow type stuff at all. He's kind of his own coach, and I'm excited to see what that produces on the field in the next few years. But he really seems like he's really taking control of this thing, and I like what I see so far. How about you? Well, he's a man of the people, without question. Yeah. I know he was going to run the Crazy Legs. I knew he was. I heard that. I don't know if I knew he was going to be the master of ceremonies, but if he's running it, I mean, it's really impressive with what he's done, and in a way, he's kind of the anti-Brett Bielema in terms of just his demeanor and the way he interacts with the fan base. I think that's a good thing, because I think Brett too many times was, it felt like he went to these things because he had to and not just because he wanted to. I mean, he was very private. He really did interact well with a lot of different functions and things like that, and he really. What hampered him early in his career was he was too worried about being in Barry's shadow. And the thing with Gary is that now he's kind of in Brett's shadow, and I think Gary has embraced what this job is all about. I mean, the other difference is that Brett was basically given this job. He was handed this job, from Barry. Gary went out and got this job. And so I think that you could see as a big difference, because Gary has really just embraced what this opportunity is all about. He was at a great spot in Utah State. I mean, you saw what he did in that program, turning that program around, and he was very confident there. And he said in his introductory press conference in December, this was one of the few jobs I would leave Utah State for. And so because of that, I think he's really, like you said, he's trying to inject that family atmosphere with the team, singing on Wisconsin, the music at practice, getting fans involved. You saw the spring game with the different fan interactions things that Gary came up with to really get people excited, and especially singing on Wisconsin. It's a way for the team to give back to the fans for them coming out and supporting them. How it's going to work if they have a heartbreaker at Ohio State again in September, that remains to be seen. How many guys are just going through the motions and are singing the words, but I've really enjoyed working with Gary, and I hope that he's around here for a long time, because I think with what he resembles and what he stands for is very good for the University of Wisconsin. Yeah, it'll be really fun to watch. I'm very intrigued by it as we enter, and of course through really the summer off now, but then fall camp coming. It'll be fun to see how he interacts and what kind of product he's putting on the field. For sure, he's already enhanced the schedule a little bit for the Badgers, so that's going to be a lot of fun here in the pre-seed or the pre-conference play over the next few years. Ben, appreciate it.
really good insight here, and hopefully we can do it again here, certainly as the summer and the season gets closer.
Well, the season kickoff's 4 months, 5 days away. We gotta have something to talk about during that time. So
I love it. You're dialed in. That's good.
Dialed in. I'm ready to go.
All right, thanks, man. That's Ben Worgull from Badger Nation, thebadgernation.com. Check out the website. Always a lot of great information there, and we only tapped a fraction of what Ben knows. So you can check us out on Twitter. We're at Cheesehead Talks. Cheesehead Talks is our handle, and we'll be posting through the draft here this weekend as well. I'm Ben Larson, CheeseheadTalk.com.
Real Wisconsin sports talk from real Wisconsin cheeseheads. The Talking Cheeseheads on CheeseheadTalk.com.